Growing up as a Muslim, I was bombarded with stories of how amazing the Prophet Muhammad was. His humility, kindness, devotion, selflessness, courage, and mercy were the recurring themes in these stories about a man who was presented as the ideal role model, a man that all Muslims should emulate. But once I started having doubts about my faith, I also began to question how good of a role model Muhammad actually was. Of course, one of the most prevalent criticisms, and rightly so in my opinion, leveled against Muhammad is the fact that one of his wives, Aisha, was 6 years old when he married her and 9 years old when he consummated the marriage, according to trusted and accepted hadiths. I've covered that topic in depth in another video, which you can find below in the video description. For this video, I wanted to discuss a lesser known but also profoundly troubling event in Muhammad's life, the massacre of the Jewish tribe, the Banu Qurayza. The story begins in 622 AD. Islam is a new religion. It's only been 12 years since Muhammad received the first revelation of the Quran. In those 12 years, Muhammad and his followers faced mounting persecution and violence in his hometown of Mecca. To escape this persecution, the Muslims migrated or made the hijrah to Yathrib, a colony roughly 400 kilometers to the north. Yathrib, which would later become known as Medina, had tribes that supported Muhammad's cause and that also converted to Islam. At the time, Medina was essentially a group of small fortified hamlets, each occupied by a different tribe. The various tribes who converted to Islam became known as the Ansar, and they commingled with several Jewish tribes, and all of these tribes fought one another constantly. At Muhammad's arrival, he became an arbitrator who negotiated truces between the feuding tribes. Several Jewish tribes also signed pacts of peace and tolerance with Muhammad. Mecca was immediately threatened by the city and growing religion to the north, especially when Muhammad began sending raiding parties to attack Mecca's trade caravans. After two major battles that more or less left the status quo intact, one of those battles which was an attempted attack of Medina, in 627 AD, Mecca attacked Medina once again. Heavily outnumbered, the Muslims prevailed in what would become known as the Battle of the Trench, so called because Muhammad ordered the digging of a trench as a defensive position around Medina. In the backdrop of all these battles, the Muslims of Medina were facing internal issues with some of the Jewish tribes. Despite the agreements they signed, 3 Jewish tribes plotted to destroy Muhammad, threatened as they were by his growing political power. When 2 of the tribes staged revolts and threatened Muhammad's life, he expelled them from Medina. As for the 3rd Jewish tribe, the Banu Qurayza, they plotted with Mecca during the Battle of the Trench, at a crucial moment when the small community of Muslims was at the brink of destruction. With the Muslims victorious, what to do with the treacherous Banu Qurayza had to be determined. Surrounded by the Muslim army, the Banu Qurayza were presented with a few difficult options: fight to the death, or surrender and hope for mercy from Muhammad. In the end, they picked a different path. They offered to accept the judgment of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, one of the Ansar of Medina who had recently converted to Islam, and a man who the leaders of Banu Qurayza trusted. Whatever he decided, they would abide by it. What happens next is shared in this hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. When the tribe of Banu Qurayza was ready to accept Sa'ad's judgment, Allah's messenger sent for Sa'ad, who was near to him. Sa'ad came riding a donkey, and when he came near, Allah's messenger said to the Ansar, "Stand up for your leader." Then Sa'ad came and sat beside Allah's messenger, who said to him, "These people are ready to accept your judgment." Sa'ad said, "I give the judgment that their warriors should be killed and their children and women should be taken as prisoners." The Prophet then remarked, "O Sa'ad, you have judged amongst them with or similar to the judgment of the King Allah." Now, why did he make this judgment, which, as the hadith says, is similar to the judgment of Allah? I had trouble finding a good source that wasn't Muslim, but I did find a source, historian Karen Armstrong, who described the judgment as an Arab custom. But one common Muslim apologist theory is that he was basing his judgment on the laws and traditions that the Jewish tribe followed. And sure enough, in the book of Deuteronomy, the following is written: "When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves, and you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies." And so, in accordance with Ibn Wahab's judgment, he died soon after from wounds he sustained in the Battle of the Trench, by the way. And with the approval of Muhammad, the 700 men of the Banu Qurayza were executed and the women and children sold as slaves.